Welcome everyone to a very special virtual panel session by Women in Cybersecurity Middle East, WiCSME 2021. Our panel is about the future of data privacy in our digital era. And tonight, I'm your moderator. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Najwa Abdurrahim. I'm from Bahrain. My experience is in technology management, digital transformation in both aviation and financial sector. Join me tonight to welcome our moderators. We have each of our panelists brings a unique perspective and experience to better understand the data privacy and its future in the digital era. We have with us Dr. Karine Tier Chooi, Chief Strategy Officer, Bond Holdings. Dr. Karine?
Hello. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Dr. Karine Tier. I'm based in Malaysia. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer of Bond Holdings in Malaysia. So I've over 20 years of experience in technology, both in engineering and also in cybersecurity. I am mainly experienced in national cybersecurity strategies, framework, critical national information infrastructure, standards such as common criteria, ISO 27001, and also privacy, cyber ethics, and to name a few. I'm very pleased to be part of the panel of this esteemed league of panels today, and looking forward for a very fruitful session today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karine. Danyetta FlemingMagana, Founder, President of Covenant Security Solutions. Hello, Danyetta. Welcome with us.
As you mentioned, my name is Danielle FlemingMagana. I'm the president founder of Covenant Security Solutions. I have been in cybersecurity for 20 years, started off supporting U.S. Department of Defense, and then moved into doing work with commercial and civilian agencies as well. So have a long history with it, as well as with my company in supporting all these different entities, and looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have today. Thank you.
Pleasure to have you with us, Danyetta. Our third panelist is Debbie Reynolds, Founder, CEO, Chief Data Privacy Officer for Debbie Reynolds Consultancy.
Hello, I'm very happy and proud to be on this panel today. Thank you so much for inviting me. So I'm Debbie Reynolds. People always call me the data diva. I am a futurist, a technologist, a data privacy strategist. I like to say that I work at the intersection of technology and privacy globally. So I work a lot with companies that are working on emerging technologies, or they're pivoting in some way to do some type of digital transformation. So again, I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much for the kind introduction.
Happy to have you with us, Debbie. And we have from Oman, Nahla AlBalushi, Manager of Information Security Management Department, Central Bank of Oman. Welcome with us, Nahla.
Thank you, Najwa, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be with such wonderful ladies who are kind of, we can say that they are kind of top of the top in the cybersecurity area. My background is I have spent almost 10 years at Petroleum Development of Oman. So it was oil and gas industry, started as a systems engineer, specifically on SAP systems. And then eventually I felt like I need to move and to do something else. And I was really interested in cybersecurity. So in 2010, and I moved to Central Bank of Oman, started as information security officer, and eventually I became the heading the department. Add to that, I'm a doctorate student, doctorate in business administration, in my third year. I'm looking at the cybersecurity incident management response planning process in general, specifically at the financial sector, in Oman. So I'm trying to address what are the issues in the process and thinking how I can improve that. Also, I have done recently a research paper along with some of GCC ladies as part of the UK GCC Women in Cybersecurity Fellowship Program. And the main topic in that was addressing the cybersecurity skills shortage in GCC region. Thank you.
Welcome, Nahla. We are happy to have such a unique and diversified experience from different parts of the world to discuss with us the future of data privacy. Data privacy is about making sure that your information is safe. With the advancement of digital era, the data privacy has been raised as a concern by individuals, which motivated IT researchers and cyber experts to explore data privacy issues and find technical solutions in order to gain the trust of users of the technology applications, to use the applications in a very trustworthy way. I'll start with my first question to Dr. Carrine. What is the current situation of data privacy in terms of utilizing the data privacy techniques in the technology applications? What is the situation now? Is that used in a proper way? What do you think? We'd like to hear from you, Dr. Carrine.
Thank you, Nashwa, for the question. So in Malaysia in 2010 itself, Malaysia actually have an act called Personal Data Protection Act, PDPA, we call it, in 2010. So PDPA was developed to handle the issues of privacy in Malaysia itself. So I would say that in Malaysia, we started pretty early. PDPA is quite similar to GDPR. The only difference is that PDPA in Malaysia focuses more on collection of information and data for commercial purposes. In PDPA Act in Malaysia, it's actually divided into 7 main principles. So the first one is the general principle, basically about consent. And then they look into the notice and choice, and then disclosure, look into the access principle, security principles, retention principle, and also data integrity. So from 2010 till now, a lot of organizations actually have improved a lot in the way they do data collection, retention, making sure the data is collected is what is needed, the information that is needed, and also for the right purpose only. And also the organization that collect the data had to make sure that the data is collected and retained in a safe and secure manner, and also prevent of data breach and so forth. The responsibility is on the organizations that collect it. With that, now I would say that it has been over 10 years, since PDPA have started, and we are improving it further. And of course, the awareness of in terms of privacy and also what sort of information that we can disclose, we have the right to say no in terms of sharing information. The awareness is getting higher, and I would say that Malaysians in general, we are very, I would say that mature in terms of privacy over here.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Carrine. Danyetta, would you like also to shed some light on the current situation of data privacy?
A little bit unique based on the jurisdiction. So here in the US, we've got a patchwork of policies that are out there. You can go from HIPAA, which is our healthcare, to GBLA, which is dealing with finance. And then we just recently got privacy legislation for children called COPPA. And then you add into that, almost every single state has their own privacy regulation here in the US. So it's not as, I think, centralized as what they have in Malaysia and with the EU, with the GDPR. But one of the things that has made it very difficult is because you've got this huge patchwork, there really isn't a very clear, I would say, protection mechanism that's in place that everyone can say, okay, this is the way that we understand information needs to be protected. So an example would be with HIPAA regulations. Right now, companies are having to figure out how to redefine that a little bit with the COVID situation, because, just, 2 or 3 years ago, you couldn't articulate to someone what your health status was, but now that's a little bit different. So I think part of the issue that we're dealing with in terms of cybersecurity and privacy is that the ball and the goalpost is constantly moving in privacy. It's not something where we're sitting down and saying, okay, well, these are our regulations. This is what we're going to design systems to. This is what we're going to set up our governance structures around. That changes based on people's individual preferences, the laws and regulations that are in place, as well as I think there's a lot of cultural implications to that. What's private to me may not necessarily be what's private to you. So I think we've got a long way to go. And I think there's definitely a lot of issues that are going to come up as we bring on these newer technologies as well.
Yeah, I think something to add on from,
Yes, please.
add on from what Danyetta was saying is that I think which is true, actually, when it comes to privacy and retention, and in case of prevention of data breaches from the data that we collected, how the responsibility falls on the organization. And of course, in terms of cyber threats and everything, it's constantly changing. The threats are getting more sophisticated. Cyber criminals are now moving in a very organized manner. And a lot of them, for the past 2 years, we actually see the trend that they are actually targeting a lot of health information, health data, because due to COVID and everything become, the sensitive data actually have now become APT, targets. So yeah.
So do you think during the pandemic, the data privacy was like breached, or the way they handle the data privacy during the COVID has been changed?
I think so, especially here in the States. I mean, that was one of the big points we had, because we do have our HIPAA, which stands for Health Insurance Portability and Privacy Act, I think. And I'm sorry, you might have to correct me there, Debbie, because we've got so many acronyms over here. But one of the big deals that companies were dealing with is that, 2 years ago, you really had a lot of constructs around being able to share health status, health information. Like you could walk in the office and you could be hacking up a storm, you could be pregnant, and no one could go and ask you. No one could say, okay, I need your medical records. You need to tell me what's going on so that I can make decisions. But since COVID came in, now that's different because we're dealing with a pandemic. So now what we would have considered private information just 2 years ago is no longer considered private information because of the pandemic and the things that it can impact for the nation and for society as a whole. So this is something I think that's just, it's going to snowball as we go forward, right? It's not going to be just COVID. We're going to start having to deal with this when you talk about privacy information, when you're talking about children. I've got 3 teens and they're online nonstop, right? So, what of that information can someone use down the road to make decisions and make judgments against? And so I think that the idea of privacy is constantly morphing. And I definitely think that this pandemic has made it even more nebulous than it's been in the past.
Thank you. Okay, we'll jump to the second question, which is, what are the emerging issues related to data privacy? Are there any gaps you see, any abuses or misuses of the data privacy? Dr. Nahla?
Thank you, Najwa. There are so many issues that we can talk about, but I will try to summarize it and maybe touch on a few of them. One, I think already mentioned by Dr. Carrine and Danyetta with regard to the, cloud technologies and what law you need to follow. So when we talk now about cloud and the debate that is happening, where your data resides, under what jurisdiction it operates, it's a great issue that we need to be worried about. Unfortunately, so far, yes, we do have many laws, many standards that talk about that. We have the GDPR. Dr. Cannon was mentioning the PDPA in Malaysia. So we have many, but I don't think yet we do have a unified way of dealing with data privacy. So this is an issue. The other issue is, to me, is the growth of data. Data is just growing exponentially. We cannot really manage even to store that amount of data. So this is another issue when it comes to data privacy. And we need also to talk about the exploitable vulnerabilities, about zero-day attacks. So when we think about where is our data stored, we need to be also worried. Is our data stored safely, or someone can touch that data and kind of misuse it? Also, I would like to touch on very important aspect. Recently, this is being discussed a lot, which is the third-party risk. So we do use third-party to manage our data. I'm not sure how well each and every organization does the third-party risk assessments. Is it enough to ensure that your data is safe, or it is kind of, very general? You receive some set of information and you're satisfied with that. So we need really to look after all these things and ensure that all the areas are kind of captured. With regard to the compliance, Danyetta was mentioning about HIPAA, which is healthcare standard. We do have, for example, PCI DSS in the financial sector. So there are many. They work in different lines, yes. But when we think again on the broader scope, we are not yet mature enough. Maybe some countries have already advanced in specific laws and regulations, but not everyone are on the same pace. And the pace of how things change when it comes to technology is quite quick. So by the time we think of kind of, a unified standard or a unified regulation, by then things have changed. Danyetta mentioned something very important, which is, I'm not sure if this data is, specific set of data are still considered private, or maybe things will change in the future. Things will be kind of open. We are talking always about open data, big data. So we expect that. With regard to the gaps also in the same question, we cannot really identify the different levels of protection to different sets of data that we have. And again, even if we talk about technologies, example, database, we talk about many technologies to ensure that the data is safe within the database, encryption, others, data masking, etc. But we need at that time to kind of classify the data to ensure that we are investing enough in protecting that data, and not investing a lot in protecting data, which is not really sensitive. We also sometimes depend heavily on technology solution. I go back to my example. When we talk about database and the technologies to kind of make sure the data is secure, the dependency on that technology makes us feel like, okay, we are completely safe. But we need to look at the other aspect, which is the 3 Ps, people, technology, and processes, and integrate all that together to ensure that, yes, the data is protected, but there is a proper process to carry all the activities related to the data. The last comment I would like to say, I think mentioned this, but I would like to repeat it. When it comes to the maturity of data privacy laws and standards, I think we need to kind of work a bit harder on developing something that unifies all the efforts around the world.
Thank you. That was so insightful, Nahla. Debbie, would you like to add to Nahla's points?
Absolutely. I agree with everything the lady said here. 2 things I wanted to mention, maybe just to separate them out. And one is data privacy versus data protection. So it's not a war between the two, but they are distinct and they are both very important. So when I think about data privacy, I'm thinking about the rights of individuals in the jurisdiction that they're in or where their data resides. So that is where kind of the laws and the regulations are right now, and they're changing a lot. There was a recent statistic, I think Gartner came out with a statistic that said by 2023, 65% of the world will be covered with some level of data privacy regulation. So the regulations are coming fast and furious. They're changing a lot in terms of what those rights are. And, as Nahla said, certain combinations of data may be considered private in one jurisdiction and not in somewhere else. So that just makes the laws and regulations more complicated. But then we have the data protection part of it. So the data protection is, now that you have this data, or even before you get this data, what are you going to do with it? Who's going to access it? How long do you need to keep it? There's going to be a huge thing about when I'm talking with clients, I'm talking with them a lot about, what data do you capture and how long do you keep it? Like, do you need it? Are you tying it to a business purpose? And this is where a lot of companies get in trouble, because they traditionally had no reason to delete a lot of this stuff. So they have these legacy stores of data, and it's almost as though, some organizations feel like it's almost like there's a diamond ring in a garbage dump or something. So they feel like they don't know what's in the data, but they want to keep it anyway. So being able to have them really reassess not only what they have currently, but what they're bringing in. Like, do you have a purpose for all the data that you're bringing in? Do you have a plan for how you're going to handle this data? How are you going to, notify individuals? Let's say if you're breached or something. At what point within the organization, what's the trigger for being able to get rid of this information? So those are all things that are coming up. But then also the emerging issues, as Nahla pointed out, was that the data is increasing exponentially. Not only is the data increasing, but the technologies that are being created that will collect even more data than we had before. So it is, incumbent upon us to try to find ways to stay ahead if possible. But I mean, the amount of data being collected, or, like I work a lot with companies on emerging technology. So a lot of these technologies will be collecting data that there are no regulations for. There aren't, for example, I advise companies on like virtual reality, augmented reality technology. So some of these technologies, let's say they're capturing the ambient sound in your room. They can tell things about where you are, what you do, your mode of living in life, just by the sounds, in around you. So, there aren't laws right now for that. So we're in a situation where, we're trying to keep up with the threats that we're seeing right now. As Dr. Carrine said, a lot of cyber criminals, they're very organized now. They're like, big four accounting firms, very organized in terms of how they share data, how they go about attacking individuals. So I think this is an exciting time to be in privacy and cybersecurity, because the threats are so great. And just having people, wonderful ladies like you at the forefront, being able to educate people and guiding organizations is very important. I want to just add one more thing to what Nahla said, and it's about third-party risk. So third-party risk will become an even hotter issue probably in 2022, because there are a lot of laws and regulations, especially in the US, that are going into effect in 2023. And a lot of those things are around third-party risk. So third-party data transfer without consent of the individual. We've seen it obviously in, GDPR, Asia and APAC countries were early on having privacy regulations around that type of stuff. So I'm hoping to see more of a unified effort around the world about maybe, I don't know if harmonizing is the best way to say it, but finding some way where we can work together, because we know, this is kind of a global issue data moves around the world all types of ways. So being able to have some way to acknowledge the rights of individuals and protect the data around the world is very important.
Yeah, I would like to add something. Like the some Nahla and Debbie was talking about this emerging technology. Another thing that's been happening is the rise of IoT. So the thing is that with IoT, a lot of us are just surrendering more and more private information, sometimes more conscious than the other time. And I think by 2021, we have over 55 billion IoTs been installed already. So there is also a portion that is who is looking into cybersecurity of IoTs, or like what information is being collected and so forth. And of course, all the privacies agreement that is sent are always very fine and nobody really understands. So I think that's also the part that that the trend that we're seeing, and IoTs now is getting more and more actually. And I think it's just gonna be increasing by folds after this. Yeah.
Thank you. That was very informative. Thank you so much. We'll move to the third question, which is what will be the future trend in biometrics and cryptography? I mean, for data protection and privacy, those are emerging technologies. So what will be the future trend, especially when it comes to legislations and regulations? So Danyetta, can you help in this question?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I think all three ladies have really kind of hinted to this. I mean, there's a big push within cybersecurity to move forward with two-factor authentication. So, everyone's iPhones, all the technology now has facial recognition, fingerprint recognition on it. And the big question is what happens with that information in the long term? And I think as we get into these newer technologies, such as drones, you're talking about artificial intelligence, we really don't know what that information produces once it's crossed and intersected. It may be something where I could predict that you're going to have a heart attack by, your smart light bulbs and the times that you turn them on and off. We don't know that. And that's what this data is going to be able to provide in the future. And I think one of the trends that we're going to see are twofold. One being regulatory. I think what Debbie was mentioning is that the harmonizing, I think at some point, there's going to have to be a global reckoning that there's some level of base understanding from a societal perspective that there's information that we all can agree that needs to be protected and how it should be protected. Regardless of whether you're in Kenya or you're in, China or you're in the Middle East, it doesn't matter. If you're touching these types of data, this is the impact to all of us globally. And there's going to have to be some level of protection from that. The second piece I think that's going to happen is the technology is going to, we're going to have more rigor, I think, in terms of how systems are being developed and deployed than what has happened in the past. I mean, a lot of systems are still operating off of what I call the old way of doing access control. You got role-based, once you're a user, you get access to just about everything within that. And I think with the way the data is moving, people are going to not only require it, but I think even nation states are going to require more granularity of control. It's not going to be, you get these sets of permissions and then you can do everything long as you've got this set of permissions. And I think that is going to be another trend that we're going to see, that people are going to be looking for more ability to be able to say that, hey, like, I was mentioning I have 3 kids. I want to be able to go back and say, hey, you can't use that Instagram data to determine whether or not they're eligible for employment. You want to be able to have some level of control over what happens to information. So I think as these things start to move forward, it's going to force a reckoning, I think, at some point, because it's being already used in ways people can't fathom or imagine, and it's having real world consequences. And it just reminded me of one article I had shared recently online. And it was this gentleman in Chicago. It was actually an older gentleman, and he had given a ride to another young man, and it just happens right after he dropped the young man off, he got shot. So, but the camera system that they had took took data. It took the camera feed. It said it had his plates, it had gunshot fire. So therefore it automatically assumed he was the person that did it. Right. So this man spent a year in jail for them to come back and say they never had any evidence to convict him. So we're starting to see where this technology is being rolled out and utilized in ways that has real world impacts. And it's not very clear, I don't think, for anyone, and definitely not for me, having been in this for years, where this ends and what we need to do other than really starting to, I'll use Debbie's word, harmonize and sync in how we're going to tackle this. So
thank you. Thank you.
Chooi?
Yes, please go ahead, Nahla.
Just to add on what Danyetta mentioned, I like the example she gave about crimes and how we can identify that. Also, we need to think differently the other way around, that even the biometric data is data sets that we need to save and secure as well. So that is another issue, because if this is misused, then it's a real disaster.
That's true. That's true. Any other input for this question? Shall we move to the fourth question?
I was going to add one thing. I was going to say that I do think emerging technologies like blockchain and some of the others that are coming on board will start to help from the privacy standpoint as well.
How do you foresee that it will help?
I think in particular with the blockchain, I think that there is more autonomy and control of information. So as people are starting to use it, it's mostly used right now, I think, and well known from a cryptocurrency perspective, but the use are a lot broader. And I think that as people get comfortable with this technology, they're going to be able to see the uses, especially when it comes to privacy. It's your ability to, save and encrypt your information in your block, and no one can come in and say that, oh, really, your birth date was changed from 2/2/25 to, to 3/2/25 or something like that. So I think as we go forward, there is hope, I would say, in terms of being able to have technologies that are coming on board that will give more control, I think, back to the individual and back to organizations for protection of information.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Danyetta. Okay, we will move to the fourth question. As a panelist here, do you envisage any innovative approaches as a future trend to overcome those challenges that we are discussing here and you thankfully highlighted? Yes, Debbie?
Well, that question goes right into what Danyetta was saying about blockchain. So I'm seeing a lot of really interesting ways that blockchain technology is being integrated into identity systems for authentication of people and stuff like that. So that's going to become really important, especially as we move into an era where we're using more sensitive information for identity. So, let's say someone steals your credit card information. You can go and get a new credit card, but if they steal your fingerprints, your iris scan, your face, you can't get a new face, you can't get a new eyes, at least not that I know of, right? So this data is extremely sensitive and it's very important to protect it. And I'm really excited to see people really thinking through this problem. And I'm seeing people in the identity space, building technologies that implement things like blockchain, because they can create it in such a way that it'll be more secure and less harder, I would say, more difficult for criminals to be able to infiltrate those types of systems. So, it's trying to create a situation where those kind of higher uses of data is protected in a way that it makes, maybe it's not worth it for the cyber criminal to try to infiltrate those systems. So they'll more go towards the low-hanging fruits types of situations. So that's what I'm hoping.
I would like to
Thank
add
you.
to
Thank
that. I
you.
think that's a very good, sorry, Najwa. So yeah, so
Go
I
ahead.
think to add to what Nayanta and Najwa and Debbie was saying is that yeah, using blockchain or even encryptions and everything, I think looking forward, our data and our personal information should be classified into tiers, you know. So and also it's like of course it's like how we classify our data, you know, the one that is maybe we have a tier system, maybe 3 tiers, 5 tiers, and so forth, and we grant access based on how much information that we need to share and everything. And of course, this will be all encrypted or in using blockchain technology and everything. And so this is something that we will grant access at the point. I'll give you tier 1, for example, and then to say the max will be the highest tier and so forth. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Karen. Any other solutions that you foresee to overcome those issues?
Well, you know, I guess I'll talk about a low-tech solution. So a low-tech or no-tech solution is to minimize the data that you collect to begin with. You minimize the data, you minimize the risk, you minimize the attack surface or the opportunity for cyber criminals to get to information. So I think companies really need to do some digital spring cleaning and get rid of the old data that's kind of, you know, languishing within organizations. Because, you know, as I'm reading through the news articles about, you know, these big companies being breached, and when you find out the details, a lot of it is, you know, we had this data, it used to be really useful, but now it has this low business value. So we put it on kind of a server that isn't very secure, maybe hasn't been patched forever. And then that's how cyber criminal gets in. So a lot of times it isn't, I know a lot of people, they want to think, okay, well, we have this bad actor, you know, someone's hanging from the ceiling and they got to the server, but it really isn't that. You know, the criminals are looking for the easiest target, the lowest hanging fruit possible. And a lot of times those situations open up the door for them to do more damage once they're in the organization. So I tell people, you know, assume that the risk is inside. You know, don't make it seem like it's a castle where someone's trying to break down the door. Like they're in the door, they're in the castle already. So what are you gonna do about protecting the data that's in the castle already?
Okay, that's great.
I was going to just piggyback really quickly off of what Debbie was saying. I think one of the tried and true things that have been around, I want to say for 20, 30 years or more for cybersecurity is governance. And a lot of organizations skip right over that to go right to the technology. And especially with, as we were talking with all the emerging technologies that are coming up, it's very important to do that due diligence up front and have clarity around what you need, why you need it, and who needs to do what with it. And that data has an expiration date. It doesn't always need to be online all the time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And a lot of the breaches and things, like she was saying, could have been prevented if the organizations did a lot of that due diligence. And it's something that you have to do continually. It changes, you know, from sometimes year over year, sometimes it can be from week to week, depending upon the type of data.
Yeah.
So that was.
I agree with that. Also, you know, governance isn't sexy, right? Governance, a lot of companies, they think of it as a cost. They don't think of it, you know, they think, so digital transformation is like, okay, we're going to implement this new system, we're going to make all this money. Those projects get a lot of the attention, they get a lot of the focus, a lot of money. Keeping things from going crazy, those things don't get as much attention, right? Because this is housekeeping stuff that has to be done all the time. It's something that organizations really need to always do. And so I see a lot of companies they fall down in the governance part, and a lot of times it's too late. So especially for small and medium-sized businesses, you know, you don't get a digital do-over. So some companies, if they have a breach, they're going to go out of business. Like, you don't get like a second chance. So it's really important that, you know, organizations big and small really take cyber seriously, and also taking the rights of individuals seriously as well. Especially, you know, a lot of companies now, they're doing business all over the world. So maybe they were accustomed to in the past, well, you know, I only do business in Omaha, right? So I'll have to think about those people in Omaha. But now you're online, you're selling data or selling products to people in other regions. So you have to be concerned about their data in their region and what the laws and jurisdiction, those jurisdictional boundaries are, and what you can and can't do with the data. But, you know, really it is, hopefully, regardless of what law that you're talking about around the world, transparency should be key, especially with data of individuals. So if you have data of individuals, you need to expect that you need to be transparent with them about how you're handling their data.
That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your insightful information. Do you foresee that the data privacy was changed after the social media was introduced and was heavily used? Was there an impact of social media on the data privacy? Who would start first?
Well, you want to, Debbie?
No. Go ahead. I've talked too much. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think privacy was changed, but I think in a lot of ways it was done as a result of social media, not necessarily because people wanted to share that information. So I think a lot of people all of a sudden got into Facebook, and the next thing you know, you've got people sharing more information than I think they felt comfortable with. And I think in some cases, they don't even necessarily understand the ramifications of what they're sharing. You know, I did a privacy event a few years back, and one of the statistics that was interesting was that you've got physical criminals that'll go look on social media to figure out, you know, who's got a new car, what's going on in your house, so they can go break in when you're away. And so those are things that I think people didn't think about, you know, as they kind of got drawn into this world of interconnectivity. So, you know, from my perspective, I almost feel like the technology kind of forced this openness that people otherwise, I think, would not have had based on how things were being managed prior.
Yeah, I think, sorry, can I just jump in? Sorry. Yeah, so I was thinking like social media, when how it just started, everybody was just doing, because like it's like a formal thingy, it's like fear of missing out. So everybody just sharing to be part of it. And next thing we know, technology got so advanced that started profiling us. And before we know it, when we think about something, the shopping ads already came out. And yeah, and I think before that, in terms of cybersecurity field, there was actually a cyber awareness campaign that we actually set up a website that they say that robbed me today, because those are the time where social media as was at infancy, everybody was putting in their legit address and their phone number and everything. And they'll say that, okay, we'll be away for a week, you know, and they have all their addresses inside there. So yeah, as what you said earlier on, is like, hey, come rob me, you know, sort of thing. So yeah, so I think that was like how social media, when we started, we were so innocent, we were just sharing everything was real information and everything. And now it got so advanced, they can know who is your schoolmates from school, who's your cousin, nephew, and they're suggesting people that you may know. So yeah.
Just to add on Dr. Carrine and what she's talking about, this the social media. The other thing which is very important is, yes, as she was mentioning, that, you know, all the information you get when you are trying to search about something, you get all that shopping and stuff that is related to your search, but also how we kind of try to merge all that information together to create a profile or an understanding of a person. So let's say you want to know about Dr. Carrine, you go to her Facebook, to her LinkedIn, to her Twitter account, and that also you know, helps you understand their mood. It helps you understand their behavior. So some of the organizations tend to study all these profiles together when they are recruiting. So even that is impacting your future as well.
That's true. Thank you very much. I think we have just few minutes to wrap up. Thank you so much for your time. And just the takeaways from our very useful and fruitful discussion is we need a unified legislation. The data retention needs to be looked into. Technology is collecting more data, and more data we collect, that means more risk we are putting our data privacy at. Then we talked about the third-party risk that needs also to be looked into. Harmonizing effort to find a way to unify all the data privacy matters. Then last but not least is minimizing the data we collect to minimize the risk of the data privacy and data security. I hope I did not miss anything. I'm sure that there were a lot of things you discussed, but due to the time, thank you so much for your time. It was a really amazing session. Thank you for your expertise. And I really enjoyed being with you in this panel discussion. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Najwa.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.